I'm going to take this classic piece of furniture to a whole new level with a technique that's been pretty popular in the furniture world for a few years now, the dipped look. I think it's the perfect chance to showcase the best of both worlds, combining a modern touch of paint with the timeless beauty of this dresser's maple wood grain. Hello, my furniture friends. Welcome back to the channel that's all about giving new life to forgotten pieces of furniture. My name is Katie and this is Salvaged by K. Scott. In this video, I'll be diving headfirst into the makeover for this thrifted maple dresser that was sitting out in my garage for months. I'm going to bring you along for the entire process, so whether you're a seasoned flipper or just starting out, this video is going to be packed with inspiration and insights that you should be able to use on your own projects. I didn't know what I wanted to do with this thing for a long time, but since it's solid maple, I knew it was going to make a great flip no matter what. The design idea that I finally landed on was to strip the dinged up old finish off of the top and down the sides a little, and then paint the bottom so it'll kind of look like it's been dipped into a giant vat of paint. I did know as soon as I saw this thing that I definitely wanted to replace these handles. They're not original to this thing anyway. And while I was unscrewing those, I was also looking over each drawer to make sure that the nylon guides that hold them on their tracks were all present and accounted for, and that everything was just in good working order. This drawer had a glue block stuck on the inside of the drawer that looked like it had always been there. I think it was a mistake from the factory that managed to hang on here for however many years. It's actually supposed to be glued onto the bottom of the drawer here to give some extra support. So I just decided to use my heat gun to warm up and soften the glue. And then I used my painter's tool and my hammer to just gently pry it off. The residue on the inside will get cleaned up a little bit later on when I'm sanding, but at this point I just wanted to get that block stuck where it should have been all along with a little bit of fresh wood glue. Before I started cleaning this thing, I wanted to modify this front skirting board a little. Every time I looked at this, all I could see were vampire teeth. So I thought I could probably just mark off a straight line across the whole thing and chop those chompers right off. Because the bottom details on the sides are a bit curvy too, and all of the edges on this are rounded, I decided to stick with that look and just use a paint can to connect the new profile to the old one. And once I knew where I needed to cut, I put a smooth cut wood blade into my jigsaw, grabbed my safety glasses and my dust mask, and very slowly and very carefully followed my pencil line down the board. Now I was ready to clean. This Simple Green is a great all-purpose cleaner that I use all the time. It cuts through grease really well, and once I had everything clean, I just went back over quickly each surface with some clean water to get up any residual soap. I needed to remove this scratched up old finish from the top and down the sides a bit, like I said, and I decided to try my carbide scraper first to see how much of it I could get out of the way before I started sanding. Once I had most of the tough stuff, the top layer off, I cleaned up the mess that I'd made, huge mess, and then got out my orbital sander and some 80 grit sandpaper to grind away the rest. Since I only wanted to stain a section of the dresser and most of the bottom was going to be painted in a solid color, I only needed to completely strip the top 2 drawers. You can actually see here the discoloration in the wood from where the original, more colonial style handles were protecting it from the sun. That staining is really common, but it's pretty hard to remove it all of the way. But I didn't need to worry about that since I was going to be covering most of it with paint anyway. I did need to fill in all of the old hardware holes though, so I took a little bit of painter's tape and just covered the inside of the holes and then mixed up some of this quick wood epoxy filler. I love using this stuff for repairs like this. It's kind of like Play-Doh, so it's really easy to shape if you need to, and it dries pretty fast to be even harder than wood. In the tube, there's a cylinder that has 2 colors in it. So you just cut off the amount that you think you can work with in the next few minutes, mix the 2 colors together, and that will start the chemical hardening process. And then I like to roll it into little noodles or worms and stuff it down to completely fill each hole and just leave a little bit of excess mounded up on top. There were also a few chunks of missing veneer along the bottom edges, so I used a box cutter first to remove anything else that was loose, and then I filled in those spots as well. After about 30 minutes, the filler was nicely hardened and cured, so I could sand off all of the excess and make it all nice and flush with the rest of the wood. I also used my sander to buff out any scratches or shallow dents on the rest of the dresser, and then scuff up the shiny original finish to create some texture for my primer and then my paint to grip onto. Now I needed to smooth out the top sections that I wanted to leave wood, so I switched to a slightly finer 120 grit abrasive to start closing up the grain, and then finally switched out to a 180 grit abrasive for the final smooth on those spots. I also flipped the dresser onto its back and switched back to my 80 grit sandpaper to fix up and smooth out my questionably straight line across the bottom a little bit. So by now I'd made quite a mess for myself in the garage, so I took a few minutes to vacuum the floor and then wiped all of the dust off of the surfaces with a damp microfiber cloth. I didn't really want to change the natural color of this maple too much, but it did need a little something, so I decided to try a paint wash of watered down beige paint. Fusion's Algonquin has been my paint washing color of choice lately, so I mixed up some of that with a little bit of water. I never measure this stuff, so sorry if you're looking for an exact recipe. I just pour and trust what I get. I brushed my watered down paint over the top 2 drawers and the top of the dresser, and then I just let it soak into the wood for a few seconds and went back over it with another clean microfiber rag to pick up all of the excess. Like I said, it's a really subtle color difference, but that's all I wanted. I left that to dry for a little bit, and I decided that I'd better measure out and drill my new hardware holes before I moved on to the painting process so that I'd have the opportunity to fix any oopsies and not have to worry about scuffing or scratching a fresh paint job. I almost never remember to do this before painting, but I did this time, so I'm very proud of myself. I bought this hardware jig off of Amazon, I think about a year ago, and I don't use it very often, but it definitely comes in handy for placing larger handles like these coppery toned ones, also from Amazon, that I'm going to be putting on here. I actually like to screw the handle that I'm using right onto the jig to get everything set in the right place. You center the middle guy in the ruler, and then the 2 side slides get locked in place based on the size of your handles. Then to set the top measurement where the jig sits on the top lip of the drawer, I put a piece of painter's tape in the middle of the drawer and then just used a straight edge to mark off corner to corner. And where those lines intersect is the center of the drawer front. So now to center the jig, I put the center mark on the little X that I've made for myself. The top shelf holds it level across the top of the drawer, and I can just drill my new holes right through the jig. I tested out the first one that I drilled just in case I'd messed something up, because I never trust myself with this stuff. Something always goes wrong. But I got lucky and it was all good, so I just kept working my way through all 6 drawers. Next, I needed to mark off and mask off where I wanted the wood to stop and the paint to begin. So I placed the top 2 drawers back in the dresser and used the filled holes as kind of a guide for where I wanted that line to go. Talking a lot about trust on this one, I don't trust any other tape than frog tape when I need a really crisp line. It is the superior tape for clean, crisp lines. I stuck down a piece to cover up those holes and then just measured across to make sure it was the same distance from the top all the way along. And once I had that first line set, I just kind of followed it all the way around, measuring to make sure that I was keeping things straight and even. The seal on frog tape is moisture activated, so I used a wet cloth to really burnish down that edge and get a nice tight seal so that no primer or paint could leak up under there. Another good hack for sealing your tape line is to use a little bit of clear coat along the edge so that if there are any gaps that paint is going to want to get up under, whatever leaks is going to be clear and not your colored paint. I pulled out all the stops on this one, the good tape, the water lock, and the clear sealer, so these lines had better be crispy. Next, I masked off all of the drawers with some pre-taped painter's plastic because I'm going to be spraying my paint and I don't want to make a mess of the sides or the interiors. A lot of people like to leave the drawers in the dresser when they spray, but I just don't think it gets as clean results. And you still have to mess with hand painting all of the edges, so this is my preference. If you want to paint with your drawers in, go nuts. Since maple tends to bleed, I needed to prime this with some shellac-based primer to seal in the wood tannins and make sure they don't leach up through my new paint and stain it. I usually roll this stuff on, but I treated myself to an expensive can of the spray version to make it a little faster and easier, and I sprayed on a pretty juicy layer of this over everything. Once that was dry, it dries really quick, I grabbed some fine 400 grit sandpaper to smooth it out, wiped up that dust again, and then got myself ready to paint. I chose this creamy white called Chateau by Fusion Mineral Paint. This is an acrylic resin paint that's super low VOC and it cures to a waterproof UV resistant hard surface in a matte finish. I chose to use my pneumatic sprayer for this project, so I strained about half of the pint of paint through a paper strainer and also added about a tablespoon of water to thin it down just the tiniest bit. Then I hooked up my gun to my air hose, adjusted the pressure on the compressor to about 40 psi, and sorted out the spray settings on a scrap piece of cardboard until it was flowing the way I liked. This paint needs anywhere from 2 to 4 hours to dry in between coats, but it was so humid the day that I was painting this. I decided to leave my first coat for about 8 hours before I sprayed on the second, and then I left that to dry overnight. Now for the moment of truth, the tape peel. Will it be straight? Will it be crisp? Will my lines match up? So much anxiety. I made sure to go really slow with this so that I didn't accidentally bring any paint along with my tape, and oh, so satisfying. Since, thankfully, I didn't need to do any touch-ups, I emptied the rest of the paint back into the jar and then rinsed my sprayer through with some water. And then I was ready to seal this thing up. Fusion Mineral Paint does have a built-in top coat, but since there's barely any of the actual paint on the wood surfaces, and since the bottom is white and will probably need some extra scrubbing at some point, I definitely needed something extra on top. I went with this bare water-based polyurethane in matte since I already had the can open, and it's not going to discolor the paint at all. I made sure to give it a really thorough mix to get all of the components evenly distributed in the can, and then again, filtered it into my spray hopper. I had to test out all of my settings again to make sure I wasn't spraying too much, since this is a much thinner consistency than the paint was, and because I probably messed with the knobs while I was cleaning it out anyways. And once I had it spraying the way that I liked, I moved over and got on my first coat. When that was dry, I went over just the wood surfaces with some more 400 grit sandpaper to knock down all of the rough raised wood fibers from the paint wash. I don't like to sand that stuff down before I get a coat of sealer on it, because I found that that can take off a bit of the color, and this way I can be sure that the color is going to stay consistent and my sanding isn't going to be removing any of that paint wash. Once I had that all buttery smooth, I cleaned up that dust, always cleaning up that dang sanding dust, and sprayed on my last coat of polyurethane. Now all that was left to do was get everything unwrapped, screw on my new handles that look incredible with this coppery colored wood, by the way, and put this thing back together. Such a massive change from the super traditional dresser that I started with. I think this looks so sleek and much more modern now. I love the warm wood tone against the off-white paint, and I know that this dresser is going to find a new home very fast. Thank you so much for watching along today. I hope you picked up some helpful tips and inspiration to use on your own furniture makeover projects. Have a fantastic rest of your day, and I will catch you all next time.